Prior to your nomination, were you aware of President Trump's statements committing to nominate judges who will strike down the Affordable Care Act?
Let's see. I don't recall seeing or hearing those statements.
People are scared of what will happen if the Affordable Care Act is destroyed in the middle of a pandemic. Before being elected, President Trump promised that every justice he put forward would, quote, will do the right thing, unlike Bush's appointee, John Roberts, on Obamacare, unquote. Judge Barrett, 18 months later, you criticized the Chief Justice for upholding the Affordable Care Act when you concluded, quote, Chief Justice Roberts pushed the Affordable Care Act beyond its plausible meaning to save the statute. My question is, how many months after you published that article did President Trump nominate you to be a judge on the Court of Appeals?
Senator Harris, I apologize. I don't remember the timing of that article. I was nominated, I believe my nomination to the Court of Appeals was announced in May of 2017.
That's correct.
But I don't remember when the article came out.
The article was published in January of 2017, so that would have been 5 months later. Justice Ginsburg, whose seat you are seeking to fill, provided the critical fifth vote in a 5-4 decision that upheld the Affordable Care Act. So let's lay this out for everyone who's watching. As I've discussed previously, 1, Republicans have spent a decade trying to destroy the Affordable Care Act. 2, Donald Trump promised to name a Supreme Court justice and Supreme Court justices who would tear down the Affordable Care Act. 3, President Trump is before the Supreme Court right now arguing that it be struck in its entirety. 4, the Supreme Court could be just one vote away from overturning the Affordable Care Act and all of its protections, including for everyone who has a pre-existing condition or may ever get a pre-existing condition. In other words, the Affordable Care Act and all its protections hinge on this seat and the outcome of this hearing. And I believe it's very important that the American people understand the issues at stake and what's at play. Judge Barrett, the day after President Trump announced your nomination to the Supreme Court, he tweeted, quote, Obamacare will be replaced with a much better and far cheaper alternative if it is terminated in the Supreme Court, end quote. But in reality, there is no alternative that protects the millions of Americans who depend on the Affordable Care Act every day. The horrifying truth is that President Trump and the Republicans in Congress are fighting to take health care away from the American people in the middle of a pandemic, as I have said. President Trump has said that he wants to protect the American people's health care. But the reality is right now, he is asking the Supreme Court to take it away, period. Senator Klobuchar, Judge Barrett, asked you earlier today, but did not receive an answer. Prior to your nomination, were you aware of President Trump's statements committing to nominate judges who will strike down the Affordable Care Act? And I'd appreciate a yes or no answer, please.
Well, Senator Harris, I want to be very, very careful. I'm under oath. As I'm sitting here, I don't recall seeing those statements, but let's see, I don't recall seeing or hearing those statements, but I don't really know what context they were in, so I guess I can't really definitively give you a yes or no answer. What I would like to say is I don't recall hearing about or seeing such statements.
Well, I imagine you were surrounded by a team of folks that helped prepare you for this nomination hearing.
I have yes.
But let me finish if you don't mind.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Did they inform you of the president's statements and that this might be a question that was presented to you during the course of this hearing?
When I had my calls with senators, it came up. Many of the Democratic senators wanted to know about the Affordable Care Act and to satisfy themselves that I had not made any pre-commitments to the president about it.
And so you then became aware of the president's statement, is that correct?
Let's see, Senator Harris, in the context of these conversations, I honestly can't remember whether senators framed the questions in the context of President Trump's comments. Perhaps so. I think from my perspective, the most important thing is to say that I have never made a commitment, I've never been asked to make a commitment, and I hope that the committee would trust in my integrity not to even entertain such an idea, and that I wouldn't violate my oath if I were confirmed and heard that case.
So just so I'm clear, and then we can move on, are you saying that you are now, before I said it, aware or not aware that President Trump made these comments about who he would nominate to the United States Supreme Court?
All right, Senator Harris, what I was saying, I thought you initially framed the question as whether I was aware before this nomination process began. And my answer to that question...
I'm now asking you if you are aware, were you aware before this hearing began?
So you're changing, you're asking me now whether I was aware before the hearing began?
As a follow-up question, I am, yes.
And what I said was that when I had my calls with Democratic senators, this question came up, and I don't recall, but it may well have been that they referenced those comments in the course of those calls. Even if so, that wasn't something that I heard or saw directly by reading it myself.
So if the Affordable Care Act is struck down, more than 100 million Americans with pre-existing conditions like heart disease, diabetes, and cancer would pay more for insurance or be denied coverage entirely. More than 20 million Americans could lose their health coverage entirely, including nearly 3 million Black Americans and over 5 million Latino Americans who received access to health insurance because of the Affordable Care Act. Insurers will once again be able to discriminate against that more than 50% of African Americans and nearly 40% of Latinos with pre-existing conditions. Insurers will be able to deny coverage to more than 1/4 of Native Americans with conditions like diabetes, heart disease, and cancer. All of this in the midst of a pandemic that is not going away anytime soon. A pandemic that, when age is taken into account, has been 3 times as deadly for Black, Latino, Pacific Islander, and Native Americans. A pandemic that has killed approximately 1 in 1,000 Black Americans, 1 in 1,200 Native Americans, and 1 in 1,500 Latino Americans. Judge Barrett, would you consider the 135 million people who gained protections under the Affordable Care Act when deciding a case that challenges that law?
Senator Harris, if I were to be confirmed and conclude that I was able to sit on the case pursuant to the recusal statute, and then if I heard the case and decided the case, I would consider all the protections that Congress put in place. And as I said earlier during this hearing, the question would be figuring out whether Congress, assuming that the mandate is unconstitutional now, whether that, consistent with your intent, this is Congress's law, would permit this act to stand, or whether the flawed portion of it could just be excised out. And that is a question not of what judges want. It's not a question of the Supreme Court. It's a question of what Congress wanted in the statute. And that is the statute, that you enacted and extended this health care coverage to millions of Americans.
What weight would you give the fact that 135 million Americans with pre-existing conditions are now depending on the protections of the Affordable Care Act? What weight would you give that?
Well, Senator Harris, as I mentioned to Senator Hirono, stare decisis takes reliance interests into account because, as I've said before, stare decisis is about keeping stability in the law. So the law often takes into account reliance interests. I can't really say, sitting here, how they would play in or weigh in this case, because that's part of the legal calculus of the case. So I can't really give you the kind of commitment or pre-commitment that you're asking from me of how I would weigh factors or how I would structure my decision-making process.
I would ask you to consider, if you are confirmed on the court, a credible benefit of the Affordable Care Act, and that a destruction of its protections will have a devastating impact on millions, hundreds of millions of Americans.